Hi, and welcome to session 1 of Excel Bootcamp. My name is Sophie Snyder, and I'm here because I love Excel for various reasons. And I think that learning Excel and getting some of these basic skills underneath your belt can be very empowering. You can reach me at either of these email addresses at any time. I can't guarantee a super fast response, but I try my hardest to get back reasonably timely, and always feel free to ping me multiple times. Generally, if you want to meet and discuss anything from Excel to career to life stuff, always feel free to reach out to me for some kind of office hours. The objective of these boot camps, not of today's session, but of the boot camps in general, is to get you in excellent shape, the best shape you've been in your life, to use Excel for a multitude of purposes. So that might be because you are cleaning and displaying some information for the hospital you work at. It might be because you're doing bookkeeping or organizing invitations for an event, something like that. Whatever it is, you might be building very detailed and intricate models in Excel. Whatever your purpose are, the bootcamp will hopefully get you in great shape to have a jumping off point, a point where you feel comfortable to do some of the basics in Excel and to even explore some of the more advanced functionality even further. Generally, I just want you to feel good about Excel after going through this bootcamp. So this session is about learning generally what is Excel. If you've never been exposed to it, or you have looked at it but you're still intimidated, this is a great starting point. What is it? What's the difference between a workbook and a worksheet? What are cells? What are columns? What are rows? And why do they have these things? Some basic formatting, a little bit of an intro, a sprinkling in formulas, and what are called hotkeys, which we'll display later. Feel free to jump around this session, go back, go forward, skip, etc. So there are over 17 million cells in Excel, and a cell is the intersection between a column and a row. So Excel 365, and I put an asterisk next to that because the number of rows and columns really hasn't been updated for a few versions of Excel. But the most recent Excel version is Excel 365. You can check your version of Excel by going into the account option or the account menu in Excel. So Excel 365 has over 1 million rows. That means you can put in data for 1 million people, for example, let's say, and over 16,000 columns, and those go from left to right, rows go from up to down. So a lot of potential capacity for information. That being said, Excel isn't a great application for big data. So 17 million cells is not that much when we're talking big data stuff. So the basic terminology in Excel, and again, if this is very familiar to you, jump ahead. But if you've never seen Excel, this is generally what it looks like when you first open. So we have your kind of ribbon, what's called the ribbon up above, and you can see it's this gray area underneath this red kind of toolbar area at the very top. So you have these buttons, the file, home, insert, page layout, etc. That's your list of tab options or menu options. And underneath that is the ribbon. And you can collapse the ribbon by clicking on this little arrow in the right-hand side. The ribbon has kind of the expanded version of each of these menu options. However, within the ribbon, as you can see, there are additional details or options for some of these. So for instance, under home, or under the home tab, under the font option, you can, and you will have more options for font changing, for example. There are the cells. this is that big white part right here. Whoops, let's see, hopefully that doesn't. This big area here is the cell area, or kind of your work area. And each individual cell, again, is the intersection of a column and a row. So this individual thing is a cell, a single cell. When your cursor is in a cell, it will be highlighted or outlined with green generally. So again, these, the columns here are kind of denoted with letters going from A to Z, and then once you reach Z, it goes AA, AB, AC, etc. The rows are numbers. So when you are at the intersection of a column and a row, the name of that cell by default is the column and the row. So here we are in cell as shown in the name box. We'll go into more of this at a future point in time, but you can change the name of a cell by clicking in this name box and naming it nearly whatever you want to with some restrictions. These little guys at the bottom, sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, etc., those are your sheet tabs. We'll go into more detail there, but just like when you're opening a book, you have all these different pages. These are kind of like your pages in your workbook. You can scroll left and right, up and down. You can zoom in and out here. There's other ways to zoom, but this is one of them. And then all the rest of it is very Microsoft-like. And these are kind of the key things that you need to know about. Oh, one thing I left out is your formula bar, which is up here. And that's where you will enter a formula or a function, and we'll talk about that again later. So what we touched on just a few seconds ago was what's a workbook versus a worksheet. So when you first see a file or someone sends you an Excel file, that's your entire workbook. Within that workbook is your worksheet. So a workbook has to have at least one worksheet, but it can have up to countless worksheets. You can have as many as you want. There are some kind of best practices around that, but you can have a ton of worksheets or like pages in your workbook. And there's more detail here if you want to read that further. The default of your worksheets are sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3, etc. But you can rename each of those worksheets kind of like you can rename how you save your workbook in general. So working with the workbooks and the worksheets, just like I showed you on that kind of basic terminology page, you have your sheet tabs at the bottom. You can name these, and I strongly recommend, in terms of like best practices, renaming them when you start working. So if one of your worksheets contains the names of all of your patients and the next one contains the names of all of your physicians, etc., maybe you rename the tab or the worksheet to be patient data and then physician data. Again, there's some restrictions about how you can name these, but it's pretty open-ended. Another best practice is to try to keep those as short and abbreviated as you can, because if you have several worksheets and they're all long named, then you're taking up a lot of horizontal space, and you'll have to like kind of scroll to be able to access them. Formatting considerations for your worksheets. You can, like I said, you can rename them. You can color them different things, and so the purpose of that might be like, I want to color all my data sheets gray. I want to color all of my kind of front end sheets purple or something, so that you as a user and other users can know pretty quickly which sheets are relevant to them or for what purpose. You can hide sheets. So let's say you built a model and you want some sheets to just sit in the back end and you don't want people to actually see like the dirty stuff underneath the beautiful cover. You can hide those sheets. You can protect worksheets, and that means that users can only select certain cells, or maybe they can't select any cells, or maybe they can select cells but they can't modify them. Just some things to plant the seeds in your mind. You don't have to remember all of this or know how to do it, but just remember you can hide, you can protect, you can change the colors, you can rename. As you can see in this image up here, let me see if this is working again. In this image, you can't see all of the sheets. For example, we can't see sheet 1 and sheet 2. If you need to, you can hit these little left and right arrow buttons, and that will scroll so that you can see those sheets and then click on them to access them. Rows and columns, again, the columns go vertical, the rows go horizontal. We called out how many of each of those there are. There's a lot of rows, more rows than there are columns. The intersection of those two is your cell. And again, the columns are denoted by letters or named by letters, the rows by numbers. Some navigation shortcuts. So let's see if I can move my head. So you can go to the last cell in a row of data by hitting Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and the down arrow button. So let's say you had a list of 1,000 names of customers and you don't want to sit there with the down arrow button trying to get to the bottom. You hit Control down and that'll take you to the last name or the last filled in cell in a list. Similarly, you can go to the very last column that is filled by clicking Control right arrow. So again, like try to be, one of the things that I have learned over many years working in Excel is efficiency, and using the Control arrow buttons really can speed up your work in Excel. Prepping and formatting your workbook. And this is a big deal because just putting a little effort in when you first start building a model or building your database, whatever it is, can save you a lot of time in the back end and can also just give you that kind of like chef's kiss for your workbook. First of all, save your workbook, save your file. As soon as you start working on something, unless you know you're just doing a simple calculation, several times I open up Excel and all I'm doing is saying, what is 96,000 times 8 or something random, then I don't save it. But if I am knowing that I'm going to start some kind of project, the first thing I do is save it. We all have experience losing a file, and that can be devastating. So save at the beginning and save often. You can adjust some basic formatting things to pretty up and make your Excel most functional. And these are all dynamic things. It's not like it's a one and done, you do it and you never have to think about it again. The column width and the row height. So the default column width in Excel is about 8 characters if you're working in Microsoft or like a PC. And characters is the number of default font characters that fit in a cell width. So the default is 8.43. I think it's about that same amount in Excel 365. It might be slightly different, but that means that 8.43 default font characters, and I think that is based on Calibri, fits. So usually I go in and one of the first things I do is change my column width. My go-to column width these days is between 11 and 13 characters. If you're working in the Mac version of Excel, I think this might have changed recently, but sometimes it's the default width or the metric is inches. You can change that, and I'll show you on the next tab what the default kind of measurement is. So to change the row's height or the column width, you go into Excel and you can either hover on these little lines, these like faint gray lines, and just drag it. So here I'm dragging the column and you can see the width number change. So again, I like to do something between 11 and 13. And that just seems to fit a lot of the numbers. If I'm working again with like big dollar amounts, then 13 is what I would lean on. If you hit Control or Command A, that selects all of your columns. And that way you don't have to adjust them all one by one. So now if I have Control or Command A selected, all of my cells selected, if I change one of these, all of them will change. Similar with the row height. So if I kind of am able to grab row height, well, maybe I can't do it on the rows. I always use hotkeys. So hotkeys are using your keyboard to do things. So here we can use the hotkey Alt-O-C-W. That stands for, I don't know what Alt-O is, but column is the C, and then width W. And again, I can change that. I can just input a number here. So if I had all of them selected, Alt-O-C-W, and I would change that to 13. Now all of my columns changed. Similarly, Alt-O-R-E, it's the row height. I'm not sure why it's not Alt-O-R-H, but Alt-O-R-E is the row height. Let's say I want all of those to be 15. It changes those. That was a very slight change. And then you can escape. So that's adjusting the column width and column height. This is what we just talked about. And other hotkeys related to this are Control Space. So if you do Control Space, that selects the row that you're in. So it's sort of like when you hover over, the column that you're in. When you hover over a column and you get this little down arrow, it's the same idea, because you can click there, but rather if you're in a cell and you want to highlight that, Control spacebar will select the whole thing. Alternatively, if you want to select your entire row, it's Shift and spacebar. Here's a little bit about how you might want to change your ruler units, or the kind of metrics of how you're measuring. So in Excel options, so you go to File, Options, let's see, Advanced. Let's see if we can find it. There's your default resolution. Here's your ruler units. So you can change that to inches, centimeters, etc. Data types. So you can use a whole bunch of different data types in Excel. Most people are familiar with using numeric things, but we're not just talking about like what is 96,000 times 8 or something like that. That any kind of number is translated in Excel as a numeric value. So like if you put in $100 with a dollar sign, Excel interprets that as the number 100. This is the similar concept behind dates and times, which we'll talk a little bit more in detail very shortly. Text. So you can also insert text into Excel. That's not to say that Excel can interpret text necessarily. You can do a lot of stuff with text in Excel, but it's not that it like can read it like AI or something. A formula is kind of like it sounds. It's like a mathematical expression. So if you enter equals 96,000 asterisk 8, that's a formula. Errors, it's a type of data type here. So like, just like when you're working with data and cleaning data, if you have NAs, if you put in something like you meant to put in equals 96,000 times 8, but you accidentally mixed in some text values there, that would be an error type of data. If you use Excel and you copy and paste pictures or create charts and diagrams in Excel, those kind of sit on top of the cells. They're not contained within the cells, so they're not really considered the data that Excel works with. So within the number category or the number domain of data types, there are different types of number categories. They're all listed here. I won't run through each of them, but be aware that you can change the format of a number, and we'll give you some examples of that. So as an example, dates and times. So the way Excel interprets a date is based on how far away it is from January 0 of 1900. So if you were putting in the date January 1st, 1900, Excel would interpret that as the number 1. And so I can't do the math in my head, but think about the current date and how many days away that is from January 0, 1900. And that's how Excel works with dates, interprets that as a number. It's very similar with time in Excel. So it includes like a decimal point on top of the date. So June 1st, 2016 is 42,522 days away from January 0, 1900. So that's the date value. And then it adds on some decimal amount for the time. So at noon on June 1st, 2016 is halfway through the day. So it adds a 0.5 to that day. This serial number is equivalent of 1 minute is approximately this number. There are a lot of date and time functions. This is not an exhaustive list, and we'll get into what is a function in Excel, but just so you can reference this at a future time, there's a ton of things that you can do in Excel with these built-in functions to work with dates and times. All right, back to cell formatting. Again, remember there is this home tab, and underneath that there's the ribbon where you can deep dive into formatting stuff. So for instance, we can format the font. We can change the font. By default, in most Microsoft applications, including Excel, the default font is Calibri. I encourage you strongly to change that font as one of the first things that you do, just because Calibri is the default, and I personally don't like how it looks. Many other people don't like how it looks. So you could do that by going into this font. You can just change it from this drop down right here. Whoops. And you could also click on this button to get kind of more options around the font. So including like bolding and superscripting and stuff like that. You can also use Control 1 or Command 1, and that will give you the same pop-out as clicking this button here. So the same like detailed menu. Clearing and deleting contents of a cell. So you can clear everything in a cell, and you can select multiple cells and clear everything, and that like brings it back to this default state of empty. You can just clear the formats, so that will leave the text or the formula. So, and you can clear what are known as comments or notes, and you'll see that later. Again, this is just like a reference to let you know that these things are options that you can come back to later. You can clear hyperlinks, so you might have put in a URL or something, and you can just take those out, and you can remove hyperlinks. Remember that there was, in that kind of intro to what Excel is, there was a zoom in and zoom out. I like to there's reasons why you might want to zoom out and see your entire model or a lot of data at one time. You can zoom in, you can set default zoom amounts. You can also split your workbook into panes and freeze certain panes. For example, if you want to freeze the top row so that when you scroll down, you still see your column headers, for example, you can do that. You can change your default font. This never seems to stick for a long time with me. I don't know why Microsoft keeps on bringing me back to Calibri, but you can if you want. Just remember, I encourage you not to use Calibri for things that you're actually working on and going to send to somebody eventually. All right, we're coming to the end, and I just want to sprinkle in a little bit about formulas and functions. I know we talked about these already. So a formula, like it sounds, and like you might have remembered from Math 101 back in the day, a formula always begins with equals. So when you enter a formula in Excel, you would click the cell. You don't have to like double click, but you just select a cell, you put in the equal sign, and you start typing. So equals 8 plus 2 would give you, when you click enter, would show 10 in the cell. You can do equals and enter in some text. You can do equals and refer to another cell. And you can do equals and enter in what's called a function, which is like a built-in formula in Excel. And I'll show you each of those. So here we are in, what is this? Cell C3. And I'm going to do equals 8 plus 10. And you can see as I'm typing that it shows up in the formula bar up above. Right. And I click enter and I see, oops, I did equals 8 plus 10. If I want to do equals 8 plus 2, you can see that the value that's shown, like on the face of it, is 10, which is the solution to equals 8 plus 2. But if you look back at the formula bar up above, you can still see what the underlying formula is. And once you click in the formula bar, it goes back to showing you the actual formula in the cell. Alternatively, you can click F2 and it will jump back to that like formula mode, or you can double click a cell and that gives you back that formula mode in a cell. So that's with numbers. You can also do equals, hello. Oops, if you're entering text, you need to put a little apostrophe or equals quotation marks, hello. You can refer to another cell. So if I want to say equals cell C3, and you can see that up in the formula bar up above, equals cell C3. And now you can see it shows you that value. And so when I change this, equals 8, now I'm going to do times 2. The value here changes. And since we were referring to that cell in this cell C5, it changes this value too. And when we double click or click F2, it highlights or kind of like shows you the cell that we're referring to in the current cell. And then a function. A basic function is something like sum, which is, addition. So equals sum C3 and C5. So we're saying equals the sum of 16 and 16, which, what do you think that is? Click enter and it's 32. Again, we can see the formula up above. We can double click or click the formula bar or click F2 and we see the formula here. And now we can see which cells we're referring to and they're color coded. So cell C3 is blue, cell C5 is red, and we can see which ones those are up above. All right, some hotkeys. Remember, these are using the keyboard to navigate and to work in Excel so that you're becoming more efficient, faster, less error prone, etc. So Control Tab cycles through applications in your, this isn't like Excel specific, but cycles through applications that are open in your window or a command tab. Control Page Up, Page Down goes through your sheets. So for example, we only have one sheet here. Let's call it like basic or whatever. If we want to add a sheet, we click here. And we call this like detailed, I don't know, detailed. So if we're in this sheet and we do Control Page Up, we go up a sheet, Control Page Down. I think the equivalent in Mac would be Command Page Up, Command Page Down. You can see we're going between sheets. F2 enters into a cell so you can modify the formula. Control N opens up a new workbook. Remember, not a new worksheet, but a new workbook. So Control N, it's a brand new blank slate. Alt-I-W inserts a new worksheet in your workbook. So here we are, Alt-I gives me a new sheet. Alt-I-M inserts a comment, or rather what's called a note now, into a cell. So we'll show you more about notes later on, but these are little things to remind you of why you're doing stuff or a source or something like that. When you enter that in, you have a little red flag, and that when you hover over it, you can see what that note is. Alt-V-Z, is adjusting that zoom level. The default is 100, but let's say I want to zoom out. We go to 50. Now everything looks tiny, smaller. Alt-IR or Alt-IC is inserting a row or a column. So here you can see we're in column H. If I do Alt-IC, now there's another column that we inserted to the left. Alt-IR, another row inserted above what we've selected. There's more and more hotkeys that we'll continue to add on. So a quick exercise. We're going to open up a new file, save it. And we're going to add 2 columns. So Control N will give us a new workbook, or File, New, Blank. We're starting always with the blank. And this is the goal of this, one of the goals of this bootcamp is to get you comfortable with this blankness. All right, we're gonna do 2 column titles, month and projected sales. So month and projected sales. Notice that I did not save it, so Alt FA gives me the save as. Save it wherever you want. Exercise 1. Name it whatever you want. Enter the word January here and $5,000 in B2. You see, I put a $sign there and I'll hit enter, but Excel recognizes that as just a number, the number 5,000. So we're going to drag using what's called the magic square in Excel down 12 rows, and Excel will kind of pick up on this pattern automatically. So we're going to hover over this little square at the bottom and drag this down, and you can see as I'm dragging, Excel is kind of telling me that they're picking up on a pattern. November, December. And then we're going to put in another number or pattern for this. So equals, you can choose whatever pattern you want to do, times 2. And I can drag this down. Let's see what happens. So this did kind of the same. It just kind of replicated that. Or if I wanted to do another pattern, let's see, clear this out. 9,000. So you can see my pattern is that I'm adding 1,500 each time. Let's see if Excel picks up on that pattern. Not so well. Did I add 15? No, I added 2,500. Whoops, hold on. Delete that. 10, 1, 2, 3. My bad. All right, let's see if Excel picks up on this. Yes. You can magic drag that down. Remember other formatting we talked about. So my default font is Aptos Narrow, but let's make sure yours is something other than Calibri. I did Control A to select all of my cells, and then you can change that, your font, to anything you want with this font above. So let's just pick something, maybe Arial Nova. You can see all the font changed. I'm going to do Alt OCW to change the column width to 11. That you can see that it didn't quite fit. The words projected sales don't fit with the column width of 11. So I'm going to Control Alt OCW, and I'm going to change that to 13. And now that fits. I'm going to center this. I'm going to bold the title, and I'm going to underline it. So just some basics. Now we have something that looks pretty. It was very quick and easy to do. Let's name this projected, or maybe sales P for projected sales, whatever you want to call it. If you wanted to change the color, you would right click on that sheet tab, change the tab color to maybe green or something, and then Control S, save, save, save. All right. That is it for today. Email me with any questions you have, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.